City of Saginaw 2022-23 proposed budget. Copies of the budget can be found in the city clerk's office at 1315 South Washington Avenue. It's also available on the city's website at www.saginaw-mi.com. City council sessions start on May 9th with a public hearing on May 23rd and an expected adoption date of May 23rd. Emails or citizen comments can be directed to 989-759-1784 or yjones@saginaw-mi.com. The 2023 proposed budget reflects our commitment to provide quality services to our residents while preserving our organization's long-term financial goals. The total citywide budget is projected to be $134.1 million. This represents a $1.7 million or roughly 1.3% increase from the 2022 approved budget. The general fund budget for fiscal year 23 is projected to be $38.75 million. This represents an increase of $955,366 or 2.5% increase from the previous year's resources of $37.79 million. Non-general fund budget accounts for approximately 71.11% of the total citywide budget. The total citywide budget increases are due to various items. The largest increase will be realized in the Water Operation and Maintenance Fund of $3.2 million, or roughly 9%, due to the allocation of the 2021 Water Supply System Revenue and Revenue Refunding Bond for planned construction projects and equipment. Other increases can be seen in personnel complement of new positions that were much needed, as well as the restructuring of Process System Control Division of the Water and Sewer Operation and Maintenance Fund. Approximately 4% overall increase to active health care. There will be a slight increase to retiree health care. However, this will be offset by city utilizing the Medicare Advantage program during this fiscal year. There will be a $3 million increase to the pension obligation citywide for fiscal year 23. During fiscal year 22, the city re-amortized all the pension assets, which resulted in a stabilization of the portfolio and leveling of the assets to an annual amount of $19 million. And this will occur for the next 25 years. There's also the addition of the American Rescue Plan Act grant fund, which is a carryover of the funds previously approved in fiscal year 22. There also will be increases to the technical services GIS and IS divisions because of the increased cost of computer software as well as training and development. The city will also realize increases in self-insurance fund and the workers' compensation fund due to increases in insurance rates nationwide. The budget does not reflect the recently council-approved collective bargaining agreement changes. The budget does reflect normal step and longevity increases. A budget adjustment will be completed after July 1 to reflect the changes in the collective bargaining agreement. Resource allocation total citywide. The breakdown of the total $134.1 million is represented in the pie chart. General fund represents roughly 29% of the total citywide budget. Special revenue funds represents 18.15% of the total citywide budget. And the largest part of the budget is represented in the enterprise funds, which consists of the boat launch fund, sewer and water operation and maintenance funds at 47% of the total budget. Internal service funds represents roughly 6% of the total budget, and fiduciary funds represents 0.03% of the total budget. So this chart reflects our mills over the last 5 years. The total tax levy for fiscal year 23 is projected to be the same as fiscal year 29 through fiscal year 22, which is levied at 14.8830. The consumer price index for tax year 21 is 1.4%. Although the city property tax remained flat, there are slight changes due to adding new brownfield capturing districts of the city. For fiscal year 2023, the city adds 700 Court Street Brownfield District. This chart represents the city's strategic plan. In January of 2018, City Council, City Administration, and members of the public identified the citywide strategic initiatives. They are the economic development of the urban core, neighborhood revitalization, arts, culture, and recreation, police and fire, and utility infrastructure. This chart actually represents the difference from 2022 to 2023. Next, we're going to speak about is the general fund. Again, the general fund represents roughly 29% of the citywide budget. This chart represents the historical city budget in millions, and you can see over the last 5 years how it's changed and it has grown for both the general fund and the citywide budget. Starting on page 64 to 78, you will find the general fund revenues. General fund budget for fiscal year 23 is still projected at 38.74%. This represents an increase of $955,366, or roughly 2.5% from the approved 2022 budgeted levels. As in the previous fiscal years, three main revenue sources for this fund are property taxes, state shared revenue, and income tax. Property taxes will be $3.9 million for fiscal year 23, and this is roughly a 4.8% or $180,000 increase from fiscal year 22. The increase in property taxes is attributed to an increase in the ad valorem taxable values of real and personal property, as well as tax administration fees. State share revenue, representing 22.56% of the general fund revenues, are projected to be at $8.74 million. This is actually a decrease of $14,052 from fiscal year 22. This reduction is due to a decrease in the constitutional segment of the state share revenues as the city population decreased from slightly above 50,000 to 44,202. Income taxes will be $14.61 million for fiscal year 23, and this is roughly a 3% or $380,000 increase from fiscal year 22. The increase in income tax, which representing 37.73% of the general fund revenues, is primarily due to increases in the projected pay rate within the city of Saginaw. Grant revenues for fiscal year 23 are expected to increase roughly 10% or $185,000. Total general fund grant allocation is $2.1 million, and this consists of Medicare reimbursements, state fire protection, and local community stabilization. License permits and fees will be $2.5 million for fiscal year 23, and this represents an increase of $258,000. The reason for the increase is due to the city receiving excise funds for the 3 marijuana establishments that are within city limits, as well as a projected increase to non-owner occupied past due fees. Charge for services are $1.3 million for fiscal year 23. This increase is 13.4% from the previous year and is due to an increase to the Public Act 425 funds as the city has been updating the various contracts. Fines and forfeitures are expected to decrease $45,400 from the previous fiscal year. This reduction is a direct result of a decrease in ordinance fines revenue. Interest and rents are $696,000 for fiscal year 23. Reimbursement revenues increased $95,969 for fiscal year 23, and this represents roughly a 2.5% increase, and this increase is largely associated to the increase in the indirect costs to the general fund. Other revenues increased $72,431, or roughly 26%. The total revenues equate to $346,281. There will be an operating transfer in from other funds of $124,467. Operating transfers in from other funds consist of the allocation from the Community Development Block Grant for community police officers that this fund provides funding for, and the repayment to the general fund from the boat launch for the purchase of a kiosk system at the Russ Lee Street boat launch. In fiscal year 23, no fund balance will be appropriated to balance the fund. In the prior year, the city allocated $330,000 for capital purchases for community public safety, police, and fire from the Rutledge Trust Fund. These funds will not be allocated at this time. Next, we're going to move on to the general fund expenditures. And as in with the general fund revenues, general fund expenditures will increase $955,366, and this is a comparison from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23. And now we're going to go into each area specifically. General government, starting on page 79 to 88, will represent roughly 8% of the total general fund expenditures and consists of the following offices: City Council, City Manager, SGTV, Human Resources, city clerk and elections, city attorney, Office of Management and Budget, and marketing. The total 23 budget for these funds is projected at $3.04 million. This is an increase from the previous fiscal year of $265,258. The increase is due to the addition of a grant administrator to the Office of the City Manager, and this is partially offset by grant funds, normal step and longevity increases, as well as active healthcare costs, increase to pension obligations, additional funds added to the election division for upcoming elections, as well as employment agency fees and OMB for assistance with various projects within the department, as well as with the Saginaw Economic Development Corporation. On page 89 to 96, you will find the Department of Fiscal Services. And the Department of Fiscal Services represents 8.38% of the total general fund expenditures and will be $3.24 million for fiscal year 23. This is an increase of roughly 5.2%. This is largely due to increases in benefits and pension obligations. On pages 97 to 106, you will find the Community Public Safety Police. Community Public Safety Police represents roughly 38% of the total general fund budget and will be at $14.65 million for fiscal year 23. This is a net increase of $96,837 from fiscal year 22. This net increase in police is largely due to increases to the annual pension obligation and active healthcare costs. The offset of this increase will be a reduction to the capital outlay for vehicles, as police department will not be allocated any Rutledge trust funds as they had in the previous year. Please note that the billable overtime from the PSN grant continues to be budgeted and has an offsetting revenue source. On page 107 to 113, you will find Community Public Safety Fire. Community Public Safety Fire, representing 24.25% of the total general fund expenditure, equates to $9.39 million for fiscal year 23. This is a net increase of $248,528, or roughly 3%. The net increase in the fire department is related to the addition of a deputy fire marshal to the personnel complement, as well as increases to the pension obligation, active healthcare costs, various supplies, insurance, information management charges, utilities, dues, and repairs to the various fire stations. To offset the cost will be a reduction to the capital outlay, as the department has not appropriated the use of the Rutledge Trust funds for fiscal year 23. On pages 114 to 119, you will find the Department of Neighborhood Services and Inspections. The Department of Neighborhood Services and Inspections represent roughly 4.2% of the total general fund expenditures and will be $1.66 million. This represents a decrease of $61,972 from the approved fiscal year 22 budgeted levels. This decrease is mostly due to the completion of the master plan and a decrease in the salaries, as the department has several vacant positions. To offset the reduction is a slight increase to the pension obligation, as well as lease payments on the leased vehicles. On page 120 to 131, you will find the General Fund Public Services. The Department of Public Services represents roughly 11% of the general fund budget and will be allocated at $4.16 million. This is an increase of $278,402. The increase is largely due to the funds required for the Ford buyback program, which is offset by revenue sources. Furthermore, as part of the increase, the department will pay interest and principal on various equipment and vehicles that are part of various installment contracts. On page 132 of the budget, you will find other general fund expenditures. Other general fund expenditures representing 7% of the general fund expenditures will be at $2.58 million for fiscal year 23. This is a net 1.29% decrease from the previous year. This decrease is due to a reduction to the allocation from the general fund for the unfunded liabilities, a reduction in the amount allocated for unemployment, and the Saginaw Housing Commission healthcare contribution. To offset this reduction will be an appropriation for the debt service payment for the Saginaw County Drain Assessment and for retiree healthcare division. Next, we're going to move on to special revenue funds. And special revenue funds, representing roughly 19% of the total citywide budget, equates to $24.34 million. These funds decrease in total by $1.65 million, or 6.35%. These special revenue funds account for proceeds from specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes. Starting on page 133 to 158, you have your major and local street funds. Major street funds will realize a net decrease of $241,178. This decrease will be largely realized in the reduction in the amount of planned capital purchases. It should be noted that this reduction is a result of a decrease in the gas and weight tax on the revenue side as the population of the city has decreased. The local street funds will be $1.78 million for fiscal year 23. This will be a net decrease of $40,960. This decrease will be realized in personnel services of $15,189, which is due to a series of retirements and new hires coming in at a lower cost, as well as in operating services of $59,873, which is due to a reduction in projects for the year. This too is a result of a decrease in gas and weight tax revenues because of a reduction in population. On pages 159 to 171, you will find the rubbish collection fund. The rubbish collection fund budget will be $4.72 million for fiscal year 23. This is a decrease of $327,157 from the previous approved budgeted levels. For fiscal year 23, the household rubbish fee will increase from $230 to $240. Revenues from household rubbish fees will be $2.57 million for fiscal year 23, and this is a reduction of $46,646. This reduction is due to a decrease in household count as well as a reduction in the number of households who pay the rubbish fee on time due to the pandemic. Other reductions will be realized in the decrease through compost site fees, special assessments, and the amount of fund balance used. On the expenditure side, the largest decrease will be realized in capital outlay. This reduction is due to a decrease in the amount of planned capital purchases. Miscellaneous expenditures will decrease by $278 for fiscal year 23, and this is due to a decrease in the debt service payment. To offset these reductions will be an increase to personnel services of $60,862, and this increase is largely due to the addition of salary and benefits of an environmental enforcement officer in the Environmental Improvement Division. Although this officer has been added to the complement, this comes with the elimination of 2 part-time skilled laborers to offset the costs in the Environmental Improvement Division. Operating services will increase $36,858 next year, and this increase is largely attributed to increases in the rate the city has to pay to Mid-Michigan Waste Authority, as well as administrative services in the Administration Division. On page 172 to 177, you'll find the Public Safety Fund. The Public Safety Millage Fund will be $3 million for fiscal year 23, and this is an increase of $127,673. This increase is due to an increase in real property tax revenues. To offset the increase in revenues will be the same increase to expenditures for salaries and benefits for 30 police and fire personnel. Please note that this levy was renewed in March of 2020. On page 178 to 191, you will find the Public Safety Grant Funds. The total public safety grant funds for fiscal year 23 will be $103,559, and this represents a decrease of $553,670. This reduction will be realized in the Police Justice Grant in the amount of $403,670, which will be completed during the fiscal year, and the COVID Emergency Supplemental Grant in the amount of $150,000, which was completed in 2022. On pages 196 to 203, you will find the Anderson Enrichment Center and Saginaw Arts and Enrichment Commission. The Anderson Enrichment Center is projected to be $88,000 for fiscal year 23, and this is a $2,000 increase. This increase will be realized in increased employment agency fees, utilities, and insurance costs. The Arts Enrichment Commission is projected to be $201,130, which is a $1,865 increase. This is due to an increase to professional services. On pages 204 to 208, you'll find the TIFA, LDFA, DDA, and Brownfield authorities. Brownfield Authority Fund will increase by $6,539 due to an increase in real property tax values within these districts. The increase included a tax capture District 17 for the 700 Court Street, which is a medical office. The DDA 2011 revenues will be $158,163. And this is a decrease of $13,661. This 7.65% reduction will be realized in a decrease in personal property tax revenue and the use of fund balance. Next, we're going to talk about Community Development Block Grant. Community Development Block Grant starts on page 212 to 234. The Community Development Block Grant related funds will be $4.91 million for fiscal year 23. This represents an overall decrease of $1.45 million. CDBG fund will be $2.52 for fiscal year 23, and this is a reduction of $1.25 million. This decrease is due to a decrease in the CARES funds that will be allocated for the fiscal year. CDBG residential loan fund will increase $160,887. This increase is due to additional funds being allocated for the city's housing rehabilitation program. The home program will be $744,283 for fiscal year 23. This represents $165,682 decrease. This reduction is due to a decrease in the funds allocated for grant disbursement. The Saginaw Economic Development Loan Fund, budgeted at $815,000, will decrease $189,000 from the previous fiscal year. This reduction will be realized in the amount of fund balance utilized to balance the fund. American Rescue Plan Fund, starting on page 235 to 236. New for fiscal year 23 budget is the American Rescue Plan Fund that was established to account for the American Rescue Plan Act grant dollars. The City of Saginaw, through the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, was allocated $52 million. These funds were allocated to assist state, local, tribal, and territorial governments in responding to the pandemic. The fiscal year 23 budget reflects an allocation of $860,000. This allocation represents a carryover of council-approved funds from the current fiscal year into the next fiscal year that were allocated for administrative costs, such as the city's contract with Guidehouse. On page 237 to 238, you'll find the unfunded liabilities fund. The unfunded liability funds will be $178,000 for fiscal year 23. This represents roughly a 10% reduction, and this reduction is due to a decrease in the amount of funds transferred into this fund from other funds. On pages 239 to 241, you will find the Capital Project Fund. The Capital Project Fund accounts for the financial resources that are used for long-term investment projects, requiring large sums to acquire, develop, improve, and/or maintain capital assets. Revenues are received through transfers from the general, streets, and rubbish collection funds. The total is $495,760 for fiscal year 23. This is a $361 decrease. The decrease is related to a reduction in the amount to be paid for the required principal and interest payments on the various installment contracts and bond issuances. Next, we're moving on to the enterprise funds. Enterprise funds account for services provided to the general public on a user charge basis. The total amount of these funds is about $62.95 million, or 47% of the total citywide budget. These funds will increase 3.83%, or $2.32 million from the previous fiscal year. Starting on page 242 to 244 will be the Boat Launch Fund, and the Boat Launch Fund will be $25,000 for fiscal year 23, which is the same as the previous fiscal year. Sewer Operation and Maintenance Funds start on page 245 to 262. The Sewer Operation and Maintenance Funds will decrease $910,974 for a total of $24.02 million. This decrease is due to a reduction in planned capital purchases as well as in debt service payments. For more detailed explanation of the changes in the fund, please refer to the presentation created by Phil Carwatt and Paul Reich on the Sewer and Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. Starting on page 263 to 280 is your Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. The Water Operation and Maintenance Fund will increase $3.2 million for a total of $38.9 million. This increase is due to increases to engineering services, cleaning supplies, insurance costs, computer software, parts and supplies in our Process System Control Division, fuel, streets and road materials, professional services for pavement patching, chemicals, utilities, and water and sewer costs. To offset the increase in expenditures will be an increase in the amount of funds appropriated from the 2021 Water Supply System and Refunding Bond. For more detailed explanation of the changes in this fund, please refer to the presentation created by Phil Carwatt and Paul Reich on the Sewer and Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. Internal service funds. And internal service funds account for the goods and services provided to one department by another on a cost reimbursement basis. Internal service funds can be found from pages 281 through pages 311, and this chart shows a breakdown of each internal service fund within the city. The total budget for this fund type equates to $8.02 million. This is an increase of $74,652 from the previous fiscal year. Starting with the Public Works building on pages 281 to 284, you will see that this fund expenditures are used to maintain the Public Works building for the divisions and departments that utilize it. The main sources of revenues for this fund is fees for services or rents that are charged to the divisions that occupy space in the building. The budget for the year will be $536,209. This is a decrease of $31,614 from the previous year. This is a result of the restructuring of facilities in the prior fiscal year. Department of Technical Services. There are two funds that are part of the Department of Technical Services: the Geographical Information System, or GIS, and the Information Services, IS. Starting on page 285 to 288 is your Technical Services GIS fund. The Technical Services GIS fund is projected to be $340,742 for fiscal year 23. This is an increase of $13,595 from the previous fiscal year. The increase in this fund is primarily due to increase in training and development as well as software maintenance and support fees. On page 289 to 292 is our Technical Services IS fund. The Technical Services Information Services Fund generates revenues mostly through charges for services for the maintenance and support of all their computers, computer software, phones, and printers. A small amount of the revenues come from sales. Revenues from these charges will be $1.66 million in fiscal year 23. This represents an increase of $50,103 from the previous year. This increase is attributed to the purchases of computer software, as well as the restructuring of the Assistant Director of Technical Services to Assistant Director System Administrator. On page 293 to 296 is a Radio Operation Fund. The Radio Operation Fund generates revenue through fees charged to user departments for maintaining and replacing radios. Revenues received in this fund will allow for the city to acquire, install, and maintain two-way radio equipment. The total Radio Operation Fund will be $110,000 for fiscal year 23. This is a decrease of $56,477. This decrease is due to a reduction in the amount provided to the fund by user departments for replacement of radios. On page 297 to 302, you'll find the Motor Pool Operation Fund. The Motor Pool Operation Fund accounts for the acquisition and maintenance of vehicles and other motorized equipment. The only exception is the fire department, which requires specialized services for their fire trucks. The Motor Pool Operation Fund will increase $5,797 from the prior fiscal year. This increase will be realized in charge for services and recognizing revenues from the Municipal Buyback Replacement Program for a purchase of a vehicle. On page 303 to 307, you'll find the Self-Insurance Fund. The Self-Insurance Fund accounts for the payment of insurance premiums and records the insurance claims, liabilities, and distribution of insurance costs to other city funds. The Self-Insurance Fund for fiscal year 23 is projected to be $1.41 million, and this is an increase of $58,263 due to increasing insurance rates in the national market as a result of nationwide economic conditions. The Workers' Compensation Fund, which can be found on pages 308 to 311, the Workers' Compensation Fund revenues are based on a percentage of gross wages for a full-time employee. The city utilizes the median of the industry rate to determine the percentage to assess to each employee by job classification. Saginaw Bay underwriters assist the city with determining those rates. Revenues for this fund will be $1.34 million. The total fund will increase by $34,985 for fiscal year 23. This increase is due to an increase in insurance rates in the national market as a result of nationwide economic conditions. Our last fund type is our fiduciary funds. And our fiduciary funds accounts for the administration of property or assets that are owned by other entities besides the city. The total of all the fiduciary funds is projected to be $34,910 and is found in the cemetery endowment funds. The cemetery endowment funds accounts for legally restricted resources. 25% of the cemetery revenues collected in the general fund are split and recognized in these funds. These revenues can be used for cemetery care purposes in accordance with the city charter. The endowment funds are projected to stay the same in fiscal year '23.